Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hopefully having an amazing day. In this video, we're going to focus on AMD's Phoenix, which are a next generation series of APUs that honestly have the potential to pretty much revolutionize mobile gaming as well as desktop as we know it. Think of an APU which is quite simply able to replace SKUs such as Nvidia's RTX 3060 and thoroughly trounce even AMD's own offerings like the RX 6500 XT. So we're going to be discussing that right in a moment and then finishing off with a little bit more Zen 4 news. But that's right after this message from the video's sponsor. And you know what? Since all of this new cool hardware is coming out, well, you may want to buy yourself a new Windows key. If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by whokeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out whokeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices. So as usual for the more recent videos that I've been putting out, I'm going to be going through these as kind of a slide and pretty much trying to give you guys as much of an overview as possible. So let's start with slide 1. As I've called it. This is kind of more of a general overview. We'll delve deeper in a moment. So the higher end SKUs in Phoenix are designed to essentially replace lower end discrete GPUs. We'll get into the specifics more in a moment. It's based on AMD's Zen 4 CPU cores and an RDNA 2/3 hybrid. Largely more free, but again, I'll discuss more about that further in a moment. The launch window, I'm told, is late Q4, but more likely to see an announcement at CES and a launch after that, so basically early 2023. The TDP is essentially identical to AMD's Rembrandts for mobile, with DDR5 and LPDDR5 support, potentially actually LPDDR5X. I'm not so certain about the DDR5X, but it does make sense because of the additional memory bandwidth needed to feed the CUs. Again, more on that in a moment. I don't think it's simultaneous. From what I understand, it will be laptop first and then desktop later. And this one's pretty obvious, but it's going to be utilizing TSMC's 5nm process. It's not going to be, like 16nm or something ridiculous. So, it pretty much goes without saying, but I'll throw it in anyway for the sake of completeness. So now let's move over a little more deeper, shall we? So, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's essentially designed to pressure Nvidia's lower-end laptop SKUs. So think of cards like the RTX 3050, RTX 3060, and it will pretty much decimate cards like the 2060, as well as AMD's own 6500 XT. So there is a ton of performance here. Of course, with any product, it will also depend upon the SKU, tons of other things as well, like power envelope, how high you're willing to clock it, and so on and so on. But we're referring, of course, to the higher end SKUs here. And talking about clocks, I have to say that I was a little skeptical initially when I was hearing these clock frequencies that I'm about to tell you guys, but I've had so many people now tell me pretty much not only the performance targets, but also the clock frequencies that I'm not 100% because ultimately, unless Lisa Su herself gets on stage and tells me, tells the world something and then launches the product, that's 100%. But I am pretty confident that this information I'm about to say is accurate. We're looking at IGPU clock frequencies of 3 GHz or higher. In fact, I'm even hearing like 3.2 GHz is possible. I want to stress, of course, this will be heavily dependent upon a plethora of factors, like, for example, if you can reduce the TDP, if you've got like a laptop and you're like running it in like a low power environment, like a battery or something like that, then obviously it's not going to boost up to those clock frequencies most likely. But if we're talking a laptop that's plugged in and you've got the thermal headroom, this thing can absolutely move. And the clock frequencies are really important, of course, as one part of the equation for the performance. But before we get into the actual workgroup processor configuration, just a little bit more about the overall chip itself. So we are looking at a clock frequency for the CPU of around 4 GHz at base. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less, but essentially 4 GHz. Boost frequency, I'm hearing single core is around 5 GHz. Now again, as with everything, it could slightly depend upon the laptop manufacturer. But, you know, from the chip itself, it's capable of around 5 GHz, which honestly is pretty reasonable when you look at what AMD have done with chips like a Rembrandt and the fact that, again, they are moving on to the 5nm process. I've already mentioned this in a few other videos, but there's 8 Zen 4 cores, which basically comprise of this chip, again, SKU dependent. So lower end obviously won't have 8. And L3 cache is 16 megabytes. The iGPU caches are larger, however, to my understanding, there is no infinity cache. Now, rather interestingly, we've already seen some notes actually that have popped up which tells us of a new graphics IP version, and it's very probable that this is actually in reference to Phoenix. Now, some of the earliest information that I was receiving, it was RDNA 2, but I was also receiving some contrary information that was RDNA 3. In fact, I mentioned it, I believe, in a few videos. Well, now I'm hearing that it is kind of a hybrid. So basically, it has the workgroup processor layout of RDNA 3. So for those unfamiliar, RDNA 3 is rumored. Ultimately, we're pretty confident of this information because it's been leaked so many times by myself and dozens of others. But again, it's not an official product. But RDNA 3 appears to have a rather different layout when it comes to the workgroup processors. For RDNA 2, there was 128 shaders per workgroup processor. This seems to have been doubled for RDNA 3, and that seems to be what we have here with Phoenix. But there does seem to be some elements of RDNA 2. I'm not quite sure what, so I'm putting an asterisk there, but ultimately, that's what I'm being told. So in terms of the specifications, it seems that we have 1536 shaders total. So the number of workgroup processors is actually identical to the RX 6800M, but the number of shaders has doubled because, again, the number of shaders per workgroup processor has doubled. So if we look at the RX 6800M, it has 768 shaders times 2200 MHz, that's official clock frequencies from AMD. So we're looking at around 3.4 T-flops, give or take. Now Phoenix, well, basically, it's 8 to 9 T-flops, actually a little more than that if you're hearing 3200 MHz. But conservatively, this is easily achievable. Even a very modest clock frequency of 2600 MHz with 1536 shaders would put us at 8 T-flops. And again, I'm hearing it's considerably more than that, like over 9 T-flops. It goes without saying that there will be other benefits as well in Phoenix, like, you know, better ray tracing performance and all of that stuff. But ultimately, this product is going to put, well, the technical term is a crap ton of pressure on Intel and Nvidia. There's some rumors I've heard, and honestly, I'm not that confident in this, but remember back in the day, I'm pretty sure Jim leaked that Intel were planning IGPUs with 320, was it 320 execution units, but then subsequently we saw some drivers which seemed to indicate there was 384. I've heard some actual rumors that that was Intel actually increasing the specification. They kind of went back to the drawing board because of what AMD were doing with Phoenix. Now, whether this is true or not, it doesn't really matter. What is the point, though, is you can imagine how this pretty much just... It's going to lock Nvidia out of a lot of the market because not only for cost reasons, I mean, I don't think, you know, Phoenix is going to cost $1.50 to produce or anything. It's going to be quite an expensive chip comparatively. But in terms of the complexities to build it and all of the other stuff, quote unquote, you can imagine how it's going to put a crap ton of pressure on Nvidia. I'll leave it to you guys in the comments. You can kind of do your own research and you can see just how much of a... let's just say how much profit Nvidia actually receive from mobile GPUs. Now, I'm sure Nvidia are going to fight tooth and nail, and I'm certain that Lovelace with its RTX 40 series is going to be pretty decent, but I suspect it's going to be a very interesting marketing battle that Intel and NVIDIA will be facing against AMD's Phoenix. I also want to kind of just throw in a few small bonus bits of news. I wasn't actually going to cover these, but honestly, they've just been burning a hole in my brain, in some cases for the last couple of days, so I'm just going to throw them in here. I actually tweeted about one, but we'll get to that one in a second. So Zen 4, you guys probably know now that we're obviously getting much closer to the launch. I've been saying for quite a while that I've been hearing around 5.2 gigahertz for single thread performance, but now we're getting closer to final production silicon, basically, long story short, and I'm hearing it's more like 5.3 to 5.4 gigahertz. So that's actually faster, because previously I was hearing that the silicon was technically capable of that, but, and this is a massive asterisk, it was with exotic cooling. So this is more likely to be something like, you know, what an AIO could achieve. That obviously means that the performance of the chip is going to go up a little bit. I personally feel that AMD are going to have the single thread advantage over the 13th generation from Intel, Raptor Lake. Although I suspect AMD may lose in multi-thread, just because obviously the way that Intel have the, you know, big little architecture. I'll wait and see. Personally, I suspect it's going to be heavily dependent upon the application and how it leverages instructions and what the time of the day is and the angle of the sun and the moon and God knows what else. But it will be very interesting. There have also been some news things anyway that, you know, Zen 4 can take ridiculous clock frequencies for the memory. In fact, AMD themselves have said that the clock frequency can be overclocked very heavily. I've made several videos about that. So 5200 megahertz does seem to be the officially supported speed, but there is some... I'm hearing from a couple of people that it may end up being faster towards launch, but 5200 megahertz is like the minimum speed. Heard like 5400, or was it 5600? I can't remember. I didn't have a note. I'm an idiot. Sorry. So I can't remember if it's 54 or 5600. And that's possibly going to happen at launch. And this is for the Ryzen platforms, AM5. I just want to be really clear. And I would take what I'm about to say with an extreme grain of salt, because I've also heard some conflicting information about this. But the launch dates, quote unquote, or more specifically the launch schedule from AMD, is allegedly going to be Zen 4/N33, roughly simultaneously. So that's going to probably be around September time. We're seeing Zen 4 launch, just for your FYI. So N31 is allegedly going to be late Q4. It's going to be before the holiday season. However, it's possible it could be delayed until CES, but I don't think that AMD want that, because clearly they're going to be put under a ton of pressure from NVIDIA's Lovelace architecture, RTX 40. And then around CES, we'll see Phoenix launch, and then later on will be N32. There's not a ton of new information there. What I will say is that personally, this is contrary to what I personally had been hearing. I had heard that N31 would be the target to launch first, or at least kind of simultaneous to N33. The reason behind that is because obviously Lovelace is going to be launching, and you know, Lovelace, I'm assuming, is going to be RTX 4090 and stuff first. So, at least initially anyway, for a couple of months, it's very possible that NVIDIA doesn't have an answer. Well, sorry, AMD doesn't have an answer to NVIDIA in the highest end SKUs. I would personally say that I'm not 100% convinced on N33 launching first, but the complexities of manufacturing N33 are clearly less than N31, so from that perspective, I can kind of buy it, because there's also like things like software. I'm sure that they have to do a lot more testing, because it's, you know, as you guys know, it's chiplets and all of that, which I won't get into in this video. So it's going to be really curious. I think that's just about it for this video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you did, well, you know, it's YouTube. Leave a like and all of that bollocks. And yeah. Yeah, thanks very much for watching. That was like the worst extra ever, but it's fine. Take care of yourselves, guys. Bye for now.